There are a couple of questions on the same topic, so I will boil it down to the most succinct. Bill DeWeese, your thoughts?
Well, the people in this room, but I know about my long history with Bill DeWeese, and the people outside this room do not, I'm sure. Bill DeWeese is the current whip of the House Democratic Caucus, and he is a man with whom I've had an ancient and unhappy history. Now, I want to stress that that history is ancient history, after all. And to keep that as something you'd continue to be concerned about, I mean, you'd have to be Irish. So, you started with the easy ones, right? Yeah, good.
What is your greatest regret from your time in the State House? What would you do differently? Be honest. What have you got to lose?
Oh, be honest. What have I got to lose? My greatest regret is that my failure to recognize some of the cliches. For example, it's been said that an institution is but the lengthened shadow of a man. And in those days, we were involved with institution building. And I didn't realize how vulnerable institutions were to another generation, if you know what I mean. As an organization, legislature, any organization, has a definition, has a culture, and the culture is defined by the leaders. But when the leaders move on, how do you build it in such a way that it endures? I think some of the principles that we operated on and some of the ideas that we built in those days into this institution are still there, but they're still there almost as residually. And I think the biggest mistake that I made was not figuring out how to guarantee certain values continuing as institutionally embedded values for the long run. Failed to do that.
What about term limits? Wouldn't that weaken the legislature?
Yes, I mean, the reality is, to govern is to choose. And you can have term limits or not term limits. If you have term limits, you have certain advantages. You have certain disadvantages. And you could go on at great length, and political scientists have. Term limits would certainly weaken the membership of the legislature and strengthen the staff of the legislature. It would weaken the membership of the legislature, but strengthen the special interests, with the lobbyists and so on. It would strengthen the governor vis-a-vis the legislature. So term limits, does it really add anything? I doubt it. I see legislatures that work and don't work in almost any context. I was active in the National Conference of State Legislatures, and I used to do training for legislative leaders. And you could see legislatures that were one legislature unicameral, some legislatures part-time. They have part-time sessions. They come up and they do their business. They go home. Large legislatures, small legislatures, and believe me, you could not figure out a structure which was best. I mean, I'm not very good at sports analogies, but you build an attack around the talent you've got, or you build an attack and then recruit the talent to do it. You can run a good big legislature, you can run a bad one. You can run a small legislature well or not. You can have a caucus system which works. You can have a committee system that works. You can have something that doesn't work at all. To give you an example of that, I realize this is sort of a tangent from the question, but on the subject of committees and partisanship and so on, when I was on the Judiciary Committee, the way we operated was that there was a Republican conservative, Warren Spencer, who was the chairman when the Republicans were in majority, and a liberal Democrat, Norman Burson, who was the chairman when the Democrats were in the majority. And Warren Spencer's right-hand guy was a fellow named Tony Sirica, who's now on the appeals court bench, brilliant guy, a Republican moderate. Norman Burson's right hand, and definitely was right, right-hand guy was Bob O'Donnell, a moderate. And the four of us worked together to produce a result. Now, so there's no magic to that. I mean, it's not about strong chairman, weak chairman, cooperation, conflict. It's a question of how you make whatever organization you want to use make it work well.
What advice do you have for incoming Speaker Keith McCall?
Oh, dear. Well, first of all, as to Keith McCall, I have a certain measure of discomfort because I find myself now, in fact, I was hoping to talk to him this afternoon, actually, talking to people and saying, I was a friend of your dad's. And so when I get to the point where I'm saying I was a friend of your grandfather's, I'm definitely leaving. But my advice to Keith would be that as Speaker, he needs to do the Speaker's job and not reach beyond that, because beyond that there is big trouble. So I think if he guarantees a fair floor process, that's definitely within his control, and that's his first obligation. Guarantee a fair floor process. Second, he ought to work with the leadership to try and make sure that there is some talent available, especially during the daytime, to actually present issues in a reasonable way. Third, he ought to try and modulate the tenor, the emotional tenor of the debate on the floor. Once you get beyond that, it's going to be difficult for him to represent the institution, which is what speakers generally do, to represent the institution in the outer world, because the outer world is on the attack. So I would urge him in that regard to be quite cautious, because he's in for a very, very difficult 2 years, and he should not take responsibility for the behavior of others, because there may well be misbehavior or rumored misbehavior or charges of misbehavior or God knows what.
Should Pennsylvania have a constitutional convention? If